Okay, can everybody see my my screen okay? Perfect. Okay, great. So yes, I think we've already sort of started to dive in already on this. So I think we're very excited about this topic. So I'll move quite swiftly through my slides. A lot of what I'm going to say has already been discussed in various different sessions already this afternoon. But hopefully just to give a sort of a snapshot overview of where I think we are with AI in publishing. So and again, I'm just talking about this from my perspective as a publisher and as an editor. So on this first slide, I've just listed many of which you've already heard, some of the ways that AI is now or will in the future potentially impact on various stages of the scholarly publishing life cycle. I'm sure there's lots more. I'm sure lots more will continue to develop. It's a very fast moving field. And I've roughly grouped them on this slide by the stage of the publication process. But of course, there's a lot of overlap between the people in these various roles. So authors, reviewers, editors, readers can, be one and the same person, when they're doing different roles, or hopefully not all on the same paper. So moving on. So just to quickly start things off, I'll talk first about authoring papers for journal publication. There's, of course, lots of uses for AI in academic and in industry research, from things like literature review, designing experiments, data analysis, data visualization. The automated research workflows are starting to be discussed. There's also lots of potential uses in library and information services, so around cataloging, information, metadata generation, all those sorts of things. These are areas that I'm very much not an expert on. So for today, I'm just going to focus specifically from the publisher's perspective and the process of article publication. But thinking about the writing process, there are many AI tools that are starting to become available and that have already been available for a while now to assist with things like language and grammar checking, both more generally for sort of any sort of writing, but also those that are trained specifically on scholarly articles. So there are tools like PaperPal that I'm aware of that can help in improving sort of the readability of articles. Obviously, we've got, and has been discussed at length, we have ChatGPT. It's just starting to be used to potentially improve the quality of writing, although I'd say there's plenty of caveats to that, using those sorts of tools at the moment to generate text. But they do have some uses that I think are starting to be available now. So things like summarizing longer content to create abstracts, for example. So something I'll come on to in my next slide, just a quick example of a plain language summary. So these are useful in terms of quality of writing. They could also help in terms of some of the inequalities potentially that are experienced by authors for whom English isn't their first language. Also, there are tools available that are helpful in selecting a journal to submit to. Many publishers have tools that can help authors identify a suitable journal for their work. So uploading an article title and abstracts, keywords, and being matched with a journal that the author might be interested in submitting to. As I say, publisher-specific tools, but also non-publisher specific tools as well that can be used in that way. Something as well, I suppose, that ChatGPT might become involved in, although again, I potentially wouldn't necessarily trust those recommendations, and I'll come on to that in my final slide. Just to go to the point I was just making on the previous slide around potential use for ChatGPT. So on the screen that you can see here, I took an abstract, a published abstract from one of the journals that I work on. It's an abstract of a paper that's quite a complex methodological research article. I will not read it out. It's quite an in-depth article in which the authors outline a new algorithm for selecting clinically plausible network meta-analysis models looking at survival in renal cell carcinoma. So quite a niche topic, quite a complex topic. So I entered that into ChatGPT and I put the query, can you rewrite this abstract in plain language for me? And if I move on to my next slide, you will see the response that ChatGPT gave me. I received that response in, a second, 2 seconds. So very, very speedy. And again, I won't read out this whole thing, but on the whole, I would say that although it's not perfect, it's done a reasonable job at rewriting that abstract. It describes the paper as a study to develop a method for choosing appropriate mathematical models that describe the effects of different treatments on cancer survival rates, which I think is more understandable than what I said on the previous slide. If you're a non-expert reader, if you're not, a health economics scientist. It follows some good plain language principles. So it writes in the active voice. It says, we looked at this, we did that. And it changes some of the technical language. So it takes, for example, renal cell carcinoma. It talks about kidney cancer. So I would say that this is a useful starting point for an author, but it would need to be checked. It would need to be edited. There are certainly bits in there that I wouldn't be happy as an author to submit as if it were my work. And depending on the journal that I'm looking to submit to, I would want to look at their author guidelines, because some journals may not like for this sort of tool to be used, may not allow it. Other journals, and in fact a lot of journals now, are starting to ask that this sort of use of a tool is disclosed by the authors. So you wouldn't want to not be aware of those guidelines before you submit. So that's just an example that I pulled up there. Moving on to my next slide, just looking at AI tools now in editorial workflows. And again, a lot of this has already been touched on by previous speakers, but looking at ways that AI tools might potentially help improve speed and efficiency within editorial. So looking at things like once a paper has been submitted, it will obviously, the first thing that's done by the editorial office, the editorial team, is to look at its suitability. So this process is something that potentially has a lot of opportunity for automation, certainly, and also AI tools to be utilized to do things like check on the subject area, is it a match for the journal? Looking at maybe at things at how current a topic is an area that the journal wants to be covering. Tools are available now that can do sort of specific technical checks on articles. So looking at the article format, does it conform to the journal's style? Does it have its disclosures? Does it meet the word count? All these kind of automations are starting to become available with tools that already exist. There are also tools available that can look at a paper's methodology, conduct statistic checks, all these sorts of things that at the moment can be perhaps quite repetitive, quite time consuming, and potentially things that can be removed from an editor's day-to-day role so that they can focus on other aspects. These are tools that potentially could be used by authors prior to submission to improve the presentation of their work. Obviously, we've already discussed in the first question about plagiarism, so I won't go over that again. There are also tools that are starting to come available for detection of image manipulation, a bit more complex as well, but there's tools available that can start to examine that sort of thing. So if I move on to my next slide. Peer review is another area, and again, it's been discussed earlier today, where AI can be used. The key area I think at the moment is for the identification of appropriate peer reviewers for a paper. So I suppose similar to the journal selection tools, matching up papers with potential people that would be suitable to peer review for them. And we heard a presentation earlier today about Profi, a tool that's used in that way. In terms of conducting peer review itself, I don't at the moment see this as an area, although AI is being looked at, studies are being done to see how AI might be used in the manner of a peer reviewer. But I think at the moment there are ethical issues here, obviously, and as has already been discussed, the potential for bias, depending on the data that an AI tool is trained on to make kind of peer review assessments. And I think also there's a matter of trust in that output, as again has been mentioned. AI tools such as ChatGPT don't show they're working, so they don't necessarily show how they've come to a particular conclusion. And I think without that transparency, it's impossible for an editor and certainly the author to trust any conclusion that might come to. But there's also potential, I think, to improve the quality of the peer review reports themselves, language and grammar tools and all those sorts of things. And I briefly mentioned as well earlier, metadata, not something I'm very expert on at all, but certainly an area where AI has potential to improve metadata. So there's some of the descriptions around an article in its kind of back end that can help improve its discoverability, and also link up content, which has been spoken about in terms of things like TrendMD, sort of making recommendations of articles that readers might be interested in based on their previous reading. Thinking then after sort of the publication process, there's lots of tools that are and are starting to become available that might perhaps help readers digest that information. So tools, things like Semantic Scholar, Scholarcy, things like that. In fact, a recently announced tool, Scopus AI, which draws on the huge amount of content in the Scopus database, they can take full research papers, summarize them for the readers, perhaps break them down into more bite-sized, easily digestible chunks. I think one of those tools creates sort of flashcards, those kind of things that can, there's so much information in an article, so many papers coming out, help readers in that way. And also just, bringing together, as I said, content based on previous reading and interests. I think an interesting use of AI will be the ways it might be used to assess quality and impact of a paper. There might be tools that publishers can use that help identify papers that are likely to be impactful and potentially channel more marketing attention to those papers. There's already tools available that use, I think it's Cite AI, they use smart citations. So we're very familiar with looking at an article's citations as a way to judge its impact, which I think is, it's been discussed a lot about being quite a flawed way to look at a paper's impact, but quite pervasive. Smart citations not only look at how many times a paper's been cited, but how that's been cited. So whether a citation is supporting the information in a paper, whether it's just mentioning it, or whether it's in fact contradicting it. So it gives a lot more nuance, I think, to those citations, what they actually mean. And as Martin mentioned in his presentation, there are tools work being done to look at tools to look at research integrity. So as mentioned, the STM Integrity Hub. And I think an important possible use for AI can be the accessibility issue. So whether that's things like creating alt text for images, creating captioning for audio information, translations, looking at whether papers meet accessibility standards. There's lots of potential, I think, for AI to help in making content more accessible to a wider spread of readers. But just coming then to my final slide, of course, there's a lot of promise with AI, but with it, as we said, it's a tool, and with any tool there are risks of misuse, and it's already an area of considerable concern with generative AI being used to create complete plausible sounding papers and images, exacerbating the problem that we already are experiencing with paper mills and so forth. As I've mentioned, there's concerns around lack of transparency with authors using AI to create papers without disclosing it. Publishers are starting to include guidance on this in their author and reviewer guidelines, following updates from organisations like the ICM Jiayi. Some saying it needs to be disclosed, some barring its use altogether. Tools like Authenticate don't currently detect AI-generated text, although these are things that are obviously being worked on, and there are other tools emerging, AI-generated text detectors. Actually interesting, some of which I test my PLS from the earlier slide on, and both of which did detect that it was probably created using generative AI, although some of the tools said that with more confidence than others. There's potential confidentiality issues which are a concern. So if you're uploading, say, an abstract or a paper even into a generative AI tool, that we're talking about potentially sensitive research data here, potentially proprietary data here, that you're asking an AI tool to rewrite, to summarize, whatever else. Where is that information being saved? Might it become part of the AI's training data? Do you want that to be the case? Are the AI GPT bots accessing information, trawling information that you might not want them to? So that's a concern. There are, however, some generative AI models that can work offline. So again, I'm sure there are ways to address this, but it's something that's a concern at the moment. We've mentioned hallucinations. So this is a response that is given by a generative AI program as a fact, but it may be a fact that is made up. It might sound plausible, but it's not based on any real data. You know, as we've said before, ChatGPT wants to please us. And I think I saw a comment in the chat earlier about comparing ChatGPT to Google. It's not the same thing. So ChatGPT will give you an answer, but what that answer is based on is very much not transparent at the moment. Whereas when you're looking at Google, you will put a question in, you'll get a selection of sources. It's up to you to judge how reliable those sources are. So it's a sort of a different thing. There's also the potential for bias, so that's also been discussed as well. So AI tools are trained on, and they are intended to simulate human behavior, and human behavior can be flawed and might contain bias. So I'll bring it to a close there, but my sort of position on this at the moment is that there's lots of potential for AI in scholarly publishing, but we need the governance, and we need detection tools and all these kind of things to catch up with the plethora of tools that are being developed. And I think we need to, in order to do that, we need publishers to collaborate with each other, things like the STM Integrity Hub. And I think as well, importantly, we need sessions like this. We need more and more discussion, training, education of authors, of researchers, and on editors on best practice for using these tools. So I will leave it there and hand over to the next colleague to talk. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura. I think next in the sequence is who's next?
Haseeb is last. Yeah.
Okay. Jiayi, is that you?
Okay. I will share my screen.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Jiayi from Chongqing University of Technology, China, as managing editor of the journal CAI Transactions on Intelligence Technology. Thanks for the invitation from ACSE. I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk about the role of AI in the scholarly publishing industry here. In recent years, with the rapid development of the industry has been influencing quickly. Everybody knows so many AI that can help write articles, check grammar like ChatGPT, Qbot. Today, I'm going to talk about AI and the integrity of scholarly publishing. The first topic I want to address is AI and authorship. As the screenshot shows, we can say ChatGPT was included in the author list. Actually, the journal's publisher doesn't allow AI to be named as an author, and any submission is included are screened out at the online submission stage. Every are handled by the editor-in-chief, and so this issue was missed. In due course, a corrigendum was issued, and not before the incorrect authorship had been picked up by Nature News, and the issue went viral. It seems that everyone from the mainstream media is taking an interest in the potential for AI to help write academic manuscript. Nevertheless, it does highlight challenges for universities and the publishing industry. The issue for academic publishing and thereby for journal editors is quite simple. What do we do about the potential use of AI in writing academic manuscripts? The options range from embracing it, those ignoring many of the attendant problems, which is most unlikely, to outlawing it, which is surely impossible. After all, since the problems have only relatively been highlighted, how can we be sure that undetected we haven't already published swathes of articles where AI was used to assist the authors? In February of this year, COPE posted the position statement of AI and authorship. It says the use of AI tools such as ChatGPT or large language models in research publications is expanding rapidly. Hope joins organizations such as WAME and the JAMA Network, among others, to state that AI tools can be listed as an author of paper. AI tools can meet the requirement for authorship and it can take responsibility for the submitted work. As non-legal entities, they can't assert the presence or absence of a conflict of interest nor managing copyright and license agreement. Authors tools in the writing of a manuscript, production of images or graphic elements of the paper, or in the collection and the analysis of data must be transparent in disclosing in the material and methods of the paper how the AI tools was used and which tool was used. Authors are fully responsible for the content of the manuscript. Those parts produced by an AI tool or are those liable for any publication ethics. Furthermore, JAMA and JAMA Network also published related policies. Authors, and after remedying of these new policies, JAMA and the JAMA Network journals will ask authors to address these questions in the manuscript. Did you use AI, a large model, machine learning, or similar technology to create or assist with creation or editing of any of the content in submission, like text, tables, figures, and videos? This doesn't include basic tools for checking grammar, spelling, references, and those authors who answer yes to this question will be promoted to address following two questions. The first one is, please provide a description of the AI-generated content that is included in this submission and the name of the model or tool used, version and extension numbers, and manufacturer in the space below. And the second one is about to ask authors to confirm that the authors take responsibility for the integrity of the content generated by these tools, and that the authors have provided a description of such generated content and the name of the model or tool used, versions and extension numbers, the acknowledgement or method of the manuscript. As publisher and editor, there are two considerations. The first part is about continuity. There are some questions we need to ask. How substantially are the contributions of AI writers carried through to the product? To what extent does the final product resemble the contributions of AI? And what's the relatively contribution of AI versus a human? And the second part is about credit worthiness. Is this the kind of product a human author would not receive credit for? Consider whether the AI's contribution would typically result in academic or professional credit for a human author. For the AI authorship issue, some software are created. The first experiment with existing solutions such as Turnitin to detect AI-generated text shows that it's extremely inefficient in this task. And in this year, a specific software called GPT-0 attracted a lot of attention in both social and mainstream media. GPT-0 promises to detect AI-generated text by analyze features referred to as perplexity and burstness. Perplexity measures whether the text is similar to the text seen by the AI language model before, while burstness measures sentence variability, which is generally lower in AI-generated text than that written by a human. Even if an extremely low false positivity rate claimed by the GPT-0 author is true, its use might be controversial. Proofreading software is also problematical. The use of model proofreading software like Grammarly, Perfect It, Pro Writing It result in increased perplexity of the text. This might present an additional challenge for some authors using this software. Their writing may be detected and flagged up as text writing using AI, especially in non-native English speaker countries, where language editing software has been widely used and help their students to at least come close to their native speaking colleagues in English speaking countries. And one situation we need to consider that the detection software applications were created almost 20 years ago. It takes another 5 to 10 years for most publishing companies to widely adopt them in the process of the pre-checking the submitted scientific papers. In the case of generative AI-based software, we may not have that much time to introduce solutions that would prevent, but most likely only reduce the number of computer-generated papers entering the review process. Chatbots will not go away, and surely further AI tools will be created. Google is already engaged in this process. Academic publishers and editors need to start a big conversation about how we are going to react to the use of chatbots. And WAME provides some recommendations on chatbots and generative AI in relation to scholarly publication. First is chatbots can't be authors, and authors should be transparent when chatbots are used and provide information about how they were used. Authors are responsible for material provided by a chatbot in their paper and for appropriate attribution of all sources. Editors and peer reviewers should specify to authors and each other any use of chatbots in the evaluation of the manuscripts and the generation of reviews and the correspondence. If they use chatbots in their communications with authors and each other, they should explain how they were used. Editors need appropriate tools to help them detect content generated or altered by AI. Such tools should be made available to editors regardless of ability to pay for them, for the good of science and the public, and to help ensure the integrity of healthcare information and reduce the risk of adverse health outcomes. The second issue I want to address is about AI and fake papers. The rise in the role of AI in the writing, creation, and complete production of research papers has taken the publishing world by storm in the last year. This has significant implications for research integrity and the need for improved means and tools to detect fraudulent research. The advent of fake papers and the systematic manipulation of peer review by individuals and organizations has led editors and publishers to create measures to identify and address several of these fraudulent behaviors. COPE defines this phenomenon as paper smears. It's the systematic manipulation of the publication process by an individual or group of individuals use dishonest practice to prevent independent peer review, share authorship, fabricate or plagiarize research. The goal is to influence the publication record and achieve financial gain. The detection of fake paper remains difficult as strategy and the tools continue to evolve on both sides. With the increasing number of paper mills and the recent release of advanced writing and image creation tools, we are raising for discussion about various ethical questions surrounding the use of AI for both fake paper creation and the production of paper based on valid research. I would like to share an example of using AI to detect image manipulation. In 2020, the open access journal publisher Frontiers added new checks to detect image manipulation and to evaluate if a manuscript has been submitted to the appropriate section and journal. In our industry, firstly, AI is being deployed to help review research papers and assist in the peer review process. The state-of-the-art artificial intelligence review assistant, which is created by Frontiers, helps editors, reviewers, and authors evaluate the quality of manuscripts. IRA reads each paper and can currently make up to 20 recommendations in just seconds, including the assessment of language quality, the integrity of the figures, the detection of plagiarism, as well as identify potential conflicts of interest. IRA aims to increase to the quality of published science, maximize the efficiency of the publishing process, peer review more objective. Peer review in the scholarly community as a vital process ensuring quality in scientific literature. However, the demand for peer review is growing at a high rate. According to data from Dimension, in 2020, more than 4.2 million articles were published, compared to just 2.2 million articles years before. The increasing amount of scientific literature published and the growing demand for high-quality peer review now makes the use of novel decision support technologies essential. The AI system has been designed in collaboration with Frontiers peer review team to evaluate multiple quality criteria on every manuscripts, as well as the various processes that take place during the peer review process. Is a system designed to provide decision support through recommendations and the semi-automated checks, but ensures the final say is always made by a human with expertise in the relevant area. This is then captured and used for retrieval and continuously improvement. It's this collaboration between machines and humans that achieve high accuracy but efficiency. Like this example shows, AI technology has great potential to promote peer review process in future. This is all my today's presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Jiayi. That was an excellent talk. And let me quickly correct my error. I think I didn't give your bio, which I should have done. So I'm going to do that now, which will explain why your talk was so good. Jiayi Zhu is the managing editor of CAAI, Transactions on Intelligence Technology at Xiaojing University Technology, China. She serves as editor for the Directory of Open Access Journal, DOAJ, and is a council member of the famous Committee on Publication Ethics, COPE. She is a member of the Youth Committee of the Society of China University Journals and council member of Xiaojing Editorial Society of Science Periodicals. So thanks so much, Jiayi, and sorry for skipping that step. So I want to also introduce Haseeb. Sam, is that okay?
I think Sam did it at the beginning.
Yes.
Oh, it did? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we
Okay,
just jump into the presentation. Okay.
Sure. Okay, I understand that mine is the last presentation for today. We have been listening to quite a few presentations. So I will not going to be used any slides. I will be sharing some of my thoughts. For the last 6 hours or so, we have been discussing so many aspects of scholarly publishing, and obviously artificial intelligence has been dominating whatever we are discussing. And of course, this particular panel is all about that, pros and cons. When Sam was briefly talking about me, you might have noticed there were quite a few words that I have been a development practitioner or facilitator. I work in the area of climate change, and I'm interested in sustainability. So what I will be doing, I will be sharing some of my thoughts very quickly, seeing all the discussions we are having regarding AI through three lenses. One is sustainability lens. The second one is justice lens, because we are part of the society. And the last one is resilience, because there are so many shocks having around us, we are experiencing. So when we say sustainability, often we think that it is nothing to do with us, we the researchers and the editors and the journal publishers, but no, it is not. We have been talking about it a lot over the years, but last 3 years, we have been talking in the publishing arena, sustainability a lot. Although you all know about SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, we are supposed to reach, quite a few goals, 17 to be specific, by next 7 years or so. And 3 years back, there was a strong movement, I would call it a movement, that publishers, we should do something about SDGs. Then came in being the SDG Publishers Compact. But I was wondering, since many of us are researchers, how can we see when we publish a paper, how can we see how it is connected to SDGs, one or a couple of 17? So my proposition is, in all the cases, I will be making some propositions. So my proposition is, why can't we have a SDG meter on the home page of our journals? We have so many metrics, we have so many citations, so many numbers. Why can't we have SDG meter, which will show in a particular volume, in a particular issue, how our papers are contributing to different SDGs? Of course, it might link to a particular SDG if we are publishing a paper, a journal on education only, so it will be linked with SDG 4 only. If we are publishing papers only on health, only number 3 SDG. So this is my first proposition, that how we can use AI, which will be collecting not only what we are publishing, but when our paper will be cited, those citations will come into that SDG meter as well. I have few other propositions, but I will not be sharing all. I have already written an article, a blog. As Sam mentioned, I am a chef. I cook for the Scholarly Kitchen. So hopefully this week, the whole paper will be published. So feel free to read it or just follow our society's Twitter. The second point I would like to mention is justice. We have heard from Vikrant that diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as accessibility is quite important now. But sometimes I wonder, we do so many voluntary jobs, isn't it? All the people, we are spending 6 hours moderating session, presenting, we are just voluntarily doing it. It is not only reviewing papers, isn't it? We are on the advisory board, we are on the editorial board. I work with Laura as her assistant editor for Learned Publishing. But what about creating, my second proposition, what about creating, I'm calling it, I am just trying to figure out what should be called, voluntary contribution transaction system. It's a mouthful, I understand. What the proposition that I'm making, since most of us, or all of us can have our ORCID ID. So whenever I work for an organization or a publisher, I will gather some points. And that will be like credit card point and other points. I will use those points or redeem those points if I need APC waiver or discount. I will be using it. If I can't afford, my organization is not supporting my registration fee, I can get an waiver by using those points. Otherwise, those voluntary services is all gone. We are just doing it continuously, as an academic responsibility. Why don't we have that point system and make it exchangeable? I don't want to talk about AI-assisted review much, but I would like to make one point. Definitely, we need to bring AI and reviewer, human reviewer together, a blending system. Because frankly speaking, I believe having voluntary reviewers, it is too much. Just imagine the publishing industry is $28 billion business, $28 billion. It reduced 2 billion due to COVID, but now it is gaining this year, we hope. And some of the publishers, their profit margin is more than Apple, Amazon, and Google. And we are getting free service from the gatekeepers, 10 million peer review. That is not just. My last point is regarding resilience. So when we say resilience, it means that there is a shock, external or internal shock, a policy change of the government, or pandemic that we experienced, or still we are through it. So how can we actually absorb that shock? Or we just live with that, we adapt to that, or we can transform ourselves because of that shock, so that when it comes again or any other shock, we show our resilience. But there are so many shocks, but I would only want to mention one thing. There are many others. We have just heard about paper mills, isn't it? And in March, oh my goodness, what a shock we faced, that 50 journals were delisted by Web of Science from I don't want to mention those big mega journals' name. But what can we do about it? One thing is, already we have some, paper mill detection tools. But I think we need a concerted effort to create an early warning system, so that it is not like that when the paper mill has a succeed, we are actually trying to retract hundreds and thousands of papers. No, doesn't make sense. We have to have a very good early warning system so that we can understand what are the cues. We can just get them and get our act together and fight it, because otherwise it is actually jeopardizing our core values, which is integrity. My last point is, we have talked about GOI, ORCID. These are both identifiers, isn't it? GOI identifies the creation, and ORCID identifies the creator. But to me, it is actually showing these two, the solidarity among all the actors. Doesn't matter where we are, which country we belong to, what role we are playing. So my last proposition is, can't we use AI as an aggregator of what we have achieved individually and aggregate that? Can't we use AI as an accelerator where we want to go, the pace we want to achieve? Can't we use AI as an appraiser so that time to time we can measure our progress? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Haseeb. I think that's the final segment. Do we have enough time to do a second part panel discussion? Is that the plan now?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. So we can
we have
kick off.
another 30 minutes remaining in this session. So probably first 15 minutes we can use for the panel discussion and 15 minutes for the Q&A from the audience.
Sounds great. Do you want to kick things off, Sam? I know you had some insightful thoughts.
Okay, fine. So I'll continue with Haseeb. So Dr. Haseeb, so there is a concern that artificial intelligence could exacerbate the existing disparities in the scholarly publishing industry. So especially between well-funded institutions and those with fewer resources. So how can we ensure that equal access and fairness in the application of AI tools?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult challenge, because before the surge of discussion on AI since last November, we are always facing that, isn't it? We do not have the repository, we do not have the internet access. So all the basic things. So to me, it is not about how to use the AI. If you do not have the internet access, how can you use the AI, isn't it? So the basic thing is having the basic infrastructure in place. That is the main thing. So when you say that well-funded organizations and not just so well-funded, often we are talking about the global north and the global south. Sorry to use those cliche terms, but that's the fact. So my concern is why we always think as institution, we are not well-funded, we are not getting enough resources to provide our researchers with a space and reagent and infrastructure. What the government is doing, we never ask that, isn't it? We see all the countries, so many fantastic infrastructure for communication, billions of dollars are being spent, despite being a country in transition, including my country. Why still we are struggling to get research funding? So my proposition would be, whoever we are here, whatever the role we play, we have to break the silo that we are researchers. Our activity or responsibility ends by conducting research and communicating it. No, since we cannot elect researchers, we cannot make our politicians researchers. Often I say that we should be politicians. Otherwise, without money, you cannot solve that problem. So resource is so important to bridge that particular gap. And to bridge that gap and allocate resource, we have to move away from our comfort zone and convince our politicians and our decision makers that why they need to invest money. And the last point is, since I said I'm from Bangladesh and we are supposed to move out of least developed country in 2 years' time, in 2026, along with other countries like Nepal. So I often think that, shall I still think of whether I will be getting waiver of APC? Shouldn't I change my mindset? Shouldn't my organization change its mindset? Shouldn't my government change its mindset? So since my economy is being shifted, so my intellectual shift should be there. And that's the solution for reducing the gap between AI use. Thank you.
Thank you, Habib. Wonderful. So let me move to Laura. Laura, with your significant experience in the publishing industry, and we have heard a lot of AI tools that can be used in scholarly publishing. In your current capacity of working with different journals and publishing houses, what kind of AI tools that you have used in your current capacity, and have you seen it has an impact on the overall efficiency or the quality?
Yeah, certainly. I guess the main tools that I've worked with so far have been things like identifying peer reviewers. So there's a tool called Reviewer Locator, which is a tool that's produced by the Web of Science, by Clarivate, and that's integrated in a lot of existing systems that we use. So, for example, the Scholar One platform where authors upload their papers, the Reviewer Locator tool can be embedded in that. It's part of that system. I've found I've been using that system for several years now, and I think over that time I've seen it improve as a system. I think I found, not just that tool, but other tools in terms of peer review identification, I've found them to be to depend on the circumstance. So sometimes when I'm working on a paper that is perhaps maybe a more clinical medicine paper, I've found the tool to be quite good. You can find lots of other researchers working in similar sort of, maybe in an area of cancer research or something like that. But other areas, I found it to be perhaps slightly, or certainly a few years ago, slightly less useful. So I've worked on health economics journals, journals that perhaps might be a paper that might be perhaps about a certain type of cancer, but what it's really talking about is a mathematical model or a methodology or something like that. I will still be recommended by those systems clinical researchers that perhaps aren't suitable. And I, as an editor, would think to myself, that's not a suitable person to review, peer review this particular paper. So I found them to be sort of helpful tools as a sort of a starting point, but I'm certainly not found as yet that I can just plug a paper in, get a list of names out, and that's my job done. I still have to, as an editor, to be aware of experts in the field. I need to be able to, do those sorts of checks. But as I say, it's improved over the time that I've been using them, and I'm sure it will continue to do so. I've used plagiarism tools. We already discussed that at the beginning of this session. Again, need human judgment applied to them. Everything depends on circumstance. It needs that sort of human eye to take the information that the tool gives you and then make judgments accordingly. I think those are the main ones. I think, going back to the previous question, some of the tools that we've been talking about are freely available, but a lot of them require a subscription to use, and academics and researchers may not have those to be accessible to them. Smaller publishers as well don't have an unlimited budget. They can't necessarily subscribe to every single tool that becomes available. Not everybody is a top 5 publisher. There's a lot of small scholarly society publishers, maybe that just have one journal. They all need to pick and choose which tools are most suitable for them. And I think this is another area where it's important that publishers collaborate with each other as well. If tools are being developed that are battling things like paper mills, those should be available to publishers large and small, so that we can all work together to help combat those problems that AI are bringing. So I think accessibility is an issue with those smaller society publishers as well, to make sure they have the tools that can help battle those problems.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question to that. So you mentioned about the peer review identification tool that's clearly. So it's just out of curiosity, what was the success rate of the peer reviewers who identified through this tool accepting your invitation to review?
Oh, that's a whole other matter. I think there's 2 issues with peer review. First of all, there's identifying people that might be suitable to review it. Having those people then agree to review it, having the availability, having the time on that, the time that they can dedicate to that, that's a whole other issue. You might have come up with a very, very good list of people that would all be excellent to review a paper. They may not have the bandwidth to be able to take that on. So I think the tool is useful for identifying people that might be suitable. It has no idea how available those people might be, how busy those people are. You may still need quite a longer list of potential people to invite, because certainly everybody you ask, it does not say yes by any means. People are busy, as has already been mentioned. People are doing this as part of their kind of academic role, but that's becoming harder and harder. People are becoming busier and busier. There are more and more papers being submitted to journals that I'm sure people get tens of invites every week, every day, probably, for some top experts. Or very well-known experts, I should say. There's a lot of people that perhaps aren't being asked that might be available and might be interested in peer reviewing, that I think maybe speaks to a bit of a flaw in the system, because the system that we use in systems like Scholar One, you will look for people that have already peer reviewed for you that might potentially want to peer review again. It's important also to bring new people into the system, and that's where it's kind of biases in these tools might come into play. You might look at people that have already published a lot, that have already peer reviewed a lot, but what you actually want is people that are maybe earlier in their career, where they might be very interested in peer reviewing as part of the process of their own education, their own training, becoming skilled in these aspects of assessing academic work, but they might not be the names that are thrown up by these reviewer recommendation systems, and I think it's important to widen that pool, make it more diverse, people from different backgrounds, different geographic areas, all these kind of things that might not be picked up by a reviewer AI system, and again, that's where hopefully humans come in, but humans themselves can also be biased. So nothing's perfect.
Thank you. Thanks, Dora. Over to you, Digran.
Okay, I saw Haseeb there smiling because I think, Haseeb, you were mentioning that compensating reviewers might be one solution. So that's a contentious issue, so I'm going to veer away from it because we could chat about it for hours. So my one question that I had, I'm excited about this SDG score that can go in front of journal, because that could be like a big motivator, you know, to have a high score slapped on. So I'm looking at the potential SDG components. There's so many. How do we work that? How do we implement that?
That's a very good question. I'm sure there are lots of university lecturers among our audience. Since 2000, I'm just giving an example, parallel example to explain it. Since 2019, THE, they have introduced a new in university ranking. It is called impact ranking. Because the world ranking, many universities like ours, we can't actually compete. You know, we are far behind. So what it does, it has separated all the ranking numbers, 100 numbers, into 4 kind of equal division. And it is research, outreach, teaching, everything is 25, 25, 25. And everything you will write, everything you will report against 17 SDGs. Number 17 is compulsory. You have to do it because it is partnership and global collaboration to reach the other 16. But other than that, you can choose another 3 or 4, whatever you want. And my university is also one of the applicants, along with other 10 universities from Bangladesh. And we are quite excited about it because we see ourselves in those rankings. And I'm part of Sustainable Development, the Center for Sustainable Development at my university. So we are very excited. But what do? They do not ask us, how many papers have you published? Since it is supported by Elsevier, so Scopus is there, so they just extract my university's name and tag it with different SDGs, definitely through AI. So what we do, we try to showcase other activities, not the research papers we published. We just tag them along. So here we can use the experience of what Scopus and Elsevier are doing and the higher education is doing, how they are extracting those names, those numbers. For example, if it is SDG, say 13, definitely climate change, the word they are searching, climate crisis, climate emergency, resilience, these are the words they will be charged. And I know that quite a few organizations, they have already started doing that. They have started mapping out, but they haven't publicly disclosed it. They are reporting it internally, and there are so many different websites where they actually categorize all the tools and others. But to do that with papers, it is quite easy. It is not quite tough. When I submit a paper, why don't you just ask me which SDG should I think it should be linked to? The job is done. So when it is published, already the meter is running, the SDG meter. So that's how I see it. Thank you.
Right. Great. Thank you very much for that. And I'm presuming from your answer, the expectation in the near future will be some rankings published if the data are being kept there, but we haven't seen it yet. So I'm looking forward to that. It sounds exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Just nowadays, what we do, we say that where our journal ranked in the discipline, then we will be saying where our journal ranked within the SDG. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Over to you, Sam.
Okay, probably we can have one more question in the panel discussion, then we can open it up for Q&A. So probably this question is to Jiayi. So, and again, it's a very generic question on the ethics part of peer review on AI that will be beneficial for the most of the attendees here. So to what extent can artificial intelligence be relied on to assist or replace traditional peer review? And what are the potential benefits and the pitfalls?
Actually, I think AI can play a role in the decreasing time reviewers need to spend accessing papers. AI can detect fake papers and identify the papers were submitted to different journals at the same time before peer review process. It avoids waste peer review resources. AI also can provide some recommendations to reviewers to help them make decisions. But the accuracy of AI can become the problem because reviewers' comments might be negatively influenced if AI's recommendations are unreliable. So I think AI can assist peer review process but cannot replace it.
Yeah.
Great. Follow-on question from that. I'm presuming from your answer, perhaps you can use AI to make sure all the guidelines are followed. For example, systematic literature review before it goes to the review. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about, where it's pre-checked reviewer? Is that?
Yes. But we need to consider because the machine learning is the data is for the past data, and maybe the data has some bias problem, and the bias problem may be result in some unreliable recommendation, and this recommendation might be negatively influenced the peer reviews attitude. So we need to consider these situations.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah.
I
Major.
think we have some similar kind of tools. I mean, the initial screening is done, so it will run for the clinical trial manuscripts. It will run through the article and say that whether it's mentioned Helsinki Declaration, blah blah blah, and such things. And do you have an objective mentioned? So I think that's the kind of initial screening. So the peer review is going to be much more easier once it is screened through this.
Yes. I think developing the system is we need to improve the system.
No, sir. My one question. One is how this artificial intelligence it is going to trace out the regional case studies which a scientist is submitting for publication in the journals. Geology, hydrology, there are so many earth sciences. These are all mostly related to case studies. How this artificial intelligence is useful?
To whom that question is?
This madam only. Now the
So
Jiayi.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
your
you do.
question is how this artificial
Intelligence is useful for regional case studies of especially the subjects like geology, hydrology, then agriculture. So how it will pre-review, especially some of the methodologies, statistical tools, whether it is appropriate or not, how artificial intelligence is useful.
I think the artificial in I think your question is about how artificial intelligence can influence or improve the peer review process.
Yeah. Review process.
As I mentioned before, I think the artificial intelligence can detect fake papers before the peer review process. If the reviewers spend their time to give comments for the fake papers, it will waste the peer review resources. And I think this is one of the AI functions to improve can help the peer review process.
Madam, these subjects are specially field oriented, and some field sections they will study which are of very significance to a particular region. And these results, if you go for submission of a paper to the journal, this peer review process through into artificial intelligence, I think it is very difficult to go for pre-review screening of that paper.
I think that is what we have already discussed, right? So we cannot replace human from the complete peer review. So the peer review, artificial intelligence peer review can be used for the initial screening. The basic things, what are there for a paper can be identified during the initial screening using AI. But if you have any subject specific in-depth understanding, which actually requires a human intervention, definitely we will have to have that. Otherwise, the technology has to further develop to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had a follow-on question, if I may, and this is for the editors and the editor-in-chief here. I was wondering if you've had any feedback, just hearing that user story that Jiayi shared regarding resources saved on the peer reviewer end. Have you had peer reviewers say, you haven't run this through a AI check, so it's going to take me too long? Run it through it. Have you had that kind of request? Laura first and Jiayi later.
Not yet, is the answer to that. I wouldn't be surprised though. I mean, as Jiayi said, if we can take some of those sort of more easily ticked off items off of the peer reviewers' plates and make their job easier, then that's going to be so much, so beneficial to streamline that process, make it less time consuming for them. And if peer reviewers start to experience journals that are doing that, when they get a paper from somebody that hasn't, there's going to be, I presume, a big difference, and with journals will probably start to get pushback from that. I don't think those kind of tools are in widespread enough use yet for that to have started happening. But you've given me something to think about there, because I'm sure it will come.
Yes, I agree. AI can have a great potential to help us to improve the peer review process, but as we know, the AI just developing in recent years very rapidly. Maybe in next way, AI would solutions for the peer review process, and we also believe the future the I may not, because I know in China, lots of in our industry, lots of companies start to create some software to develop for our for the peer review and the other process.
Great. Thanks for that answer. Very interesting area to be watched very closely. So I'm watching the time, and I think we have